You know, have you ever been talking to someone and they're just so sure they understand something really complex, but you can just tell they've kind of missed the mark? And no matter what you say, they just won't let go of their idea.
Definitely. It's that stubbornness, isn't it? Clinging to a belief. And what's really wild is this isn't new.
Right.
We're actually about to look at an ancient text where this exact thing happens.
Yeah.
And the implications are, well, pretty huge.
Exactly. So today we're doing a deep dive into the Mahātaṇhāsaṅkhayasuttaṃ. Bit of a mouthful. Often called the Discourse on the Destruction of Craving. It's from the Majjhima Nikaya, and it really tackles a massive question. What is consciousness, actually? And maybe more importantly, how does getting that right or wrong shape, well, everything? Our reality, suffering, even freedom.
Yeah, that's the core of it. Our mission today is really to unpack this specific ancient argument about consciousness. We want to explore what it means for understanding why we suffer and how we might get free. And along the way, you'll pick up some really universal stuff about knowledge, belief, and, truth itself. It shows how nailing down a core concept can totally change your perspective.
All right, let's get into it. So the scene is Sāti, Jetavana Monastery. The Buddha's there.
Right, a major center. Lots of monks studying, meditating.
But even there, a problem pops up. There's this monk, Sāti, son of a fisherman, the text says, and he's got this, well, the text calls it a wicked view.
Yeah, paṭiccasamuppāda, that's the Pali term. Sāti was completely convinced that this very same consciousness runs on and transmigrates without change.
So like a little unchanging soul thing hopping from life to life?
Exactly. He saw it as this fixed, permanent entity, something solid just moving along.
And the other monks, they heard this and thought, uh-oh.
Pretty much. They immediately saw this wasn't what the Buddha taught. They tried to, gently correct him.
Okay.
They explained, look, the Buddha teaches consciousness is dependently arisen paṭiccasamuppāda. It doesn't just exist on its own, unchanging.
It needs a cause.
Right. They stressed there is no arising of consciousness without a cause.
But Sāti.
He just dug his heels in.
Yeah.
The text says he clung to his view staunchly and tenaciously, wouldn't budge.
Wow. Stubborn.
So stubborn that the other monks felt they had no choice. They had to take it to the Buddha himself.
Okay, so the big confrontation. The Buddha calls Sāti in and asks him straight up, is this what you believe? And Sāti just repeats his mistaken view, doesn't back down.
And the Buddha's reaction, I imagine it wasn't mild.
Not at all. He gives Sāti a really stern rebuke, calls him a mogaparisa.
Which means?
Foolish man, basically.
Yeah.
But it carries this connotation of being empty, like his understanding is worthless. He tells Sāti he's misrepresenting the teaching, harming himself, and piling up bad karma, essentially.
Oof. Strong word.
Very. And then the Buddha just states the core teaching again. Consciousness is dependently arisen, period. It cannot arise without a cause.
And just to be sure everyone else is on the same page, he turns to the other monks. Do you guys understand it Sāti's way? And they're like, nope, we get it. Dependently arisen.
Phew. Okay. And then comes the analogy, right? To really drive the point home.
Yes. This is brilliant. The fire analogy. It's so simple but so effective.
How does it go?
The Buddha says, look, fire gets its name from what it burns, right? You don't just say fire, you say wood fire or grass fire or, cow dung fire.
Oh, rubbish fire. He lists quite a few.
He does. Chip fire, husk fire. The point is, the name depends on the fuel.
Okay. So how does that relate to consciousness?
In the exact same way. Consciousness is named after the conditions that cause it to arise.
So I plus a form.
Equals eye consciousness.
Aiku viññāṇa.
Ear plus a sound.
Ear consciousness. Sota viññāṇa.
Nose plus smell is nose consciousness. Tongue plus taste is tongue consciousness.
Body plus touch is body consciousness. And mind plus mental phenomena, thoughts, ideas.
Mind consciousness. Viññāṇa.
Got it.
So what's the absolute key takeaway from that? What does it tell us?
Well, it completely flips Sāti's idea on its head, right? Consciousness isn't something that's fixed and just moves around.
Exactly. It's not an entity. It's a process. It's something that happens when certain conditions come together. It arises, and it's named based on those specific conditions.
That's a fundamental shift. It's not a noun. It's more like a verb.
Kind of, yeah. It's dynamic, not static. And understanding that dynamic nature opens up this much broader picture of how experience works.
Which leads into the idea of nutriments, the ahara.
Precisely. The Buddha explains that our existence, the way beings keep going, is sustained by 4 kinds of food or nutriment.
Okay, what are they?
First, there's physical food, actual food, gross or subtle. Second is contact phasa sensory input.
Okay.
Third is mental volition, manasanucetana, our intentions, our will. And fourth is consciousness itself, viññāṇa.
Consciousness is a nutriment. How does that work?
It sustains the process of becoming, of continued experience.
Mm-hmm.
But the really big question this raises is, okay, if these things sustain us, what causes them? What keeps this whole cycle going, especially the suffering part?
And this is where we get into that chain, right? Dependent arising.
Yes, the chain of conditions.
Mm-hmm.
And the root cause, the driver behind all four nutriments, is identified as craving. Paṭiccasamuppāda.
Craving fuels everything. And craving itself comes from?
Feeling, viññāṇa. Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral sensations.
This comes from?
Contact, phassa. The meeting of sense organ, object, and consciousness.
Which needs the six sense bases, eyes, ears, nose, etc. Sayatana.
Which arise from name and form, namarupa, basically mind and body, the psychophysical organism.
Which arises from consciousness, viññāṇa, the very thing we were just defining.
See how it loops back?
Yeah.
Consciousness arises from volitional formations. Sāka, these deep-seated mental habits and tendencies.
And those arise from the ultimate root.
Ignorance, avijjā. Not understanding things as they truly are, particularly not understanding this very process.
Wow. Okay, so let's trace that whole chain forward quickly. Ignorance leads to?
Volitional formations.
Which lead to consciousness.
Then name and form.
Then the six sense bases.
Then contact.
Then feeling.
In craving.
Then clinging, upadana.
Then becoming, bhava, the drive for continued existence.
Then birth, jati.
And inevitably, old age, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, despair, the whole shebang.
That's the arising of the entire mass of suffering, laid out like a blueprint.
Exactly. It shows the mechanics. It's not random, it's conditioned.
Yeah.
And the Buddha even gives a really concrete example, doesn't he?
Yeah, the conception example, to show how life itself arises through conditions.
Right. He says for conception, you need three things. The parents uniting, the mother being fertile, and the presence of a gandhava.
A gandhava. What's that exactly? It sounds a bit mythical.
Well, in this context, it's generally understood as the being to be reborn. So the stream of consciousness or the karmic energy ready to link into a new life. It's not a soul, remember, but this connecting consciousness.
Okay, so those three conditions meet, conception happens.
Then the text describes the mother carrying the child, the difficulties, the birth.
The nourishment, interestingly, it mentions mother's milk as being like her own blood in noble discipline.
Yeah, highlighting the deep connection and sacrifice. Then the child grows, plays, starts interacting with the world through the five senses.
And here's the crucial link back to the chain, right?
Exactly. If that growing person encounters pleasant things, sights, sounds, smells, and delights in them, gets attached.
Or encounters unpleasant things and reacts with aversion.
And does all this without mindfulness, without awareness of what's happening.
Yeah.
Then craving arises.
And boom, you're hooked right back into that cycle of feeling, craving, clinging, becoming, suffering.
It keeps the whole wheel turning, life after life.
Okay, so that's how suffering arises, dependent and arising. But the flip side is liberation, right? Dependent cessation.
Yes, nirodha. And it's beautifully logical. If the chain arises based on conditions, it ceases when those conditions cease. You just reverse it.
So if ignorance ceases completely.
Then volitional formations cease.
And if those cease, consciousness ceases.
And then name and form, the sense bases, contact, feeling, craving, clinging, becoming, birth, all cease.
Meaning the cessation of old age, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, despair.
The cessation of the entire mass of suffering. That's the path to freedom.
It's an incredible framework, but how does someone actually do that? It sounds great theoretically, but what's the practice?
Right. The theory needs a practical application. The Buddha often illustrates this, starting with someone, maybe a householder, hearing this teaching, the Dhamma.
And it resonates.
Deeply. They gain faith, confidence, and this inspires a big life change. They decide to leave the household life, give up worldly possessions and entanglements, and ordain as a monk or nun.
That's a huge step. And it involves a serious commitment to ethics, right?
Absolutely fundamental.
Yeah.
The practitioner undertakes training rules, abstaining from killing, stealing, sexual activity, lying, divisive speech, harsh speech, idle chatter. It's a whole package.
It seems very comprehensive. Anything else specifically mentioned here?
Oh, yeah. Abstaining from harming plants, eating after midday, entertainment like dancing and singing, using perfumes or adornments, high or luxurious beds, accepting gold and silver.
Wow.
Accepting raw grains, raw meat, women, slaves, animals like goats, sheep, chickens, elephants, even land.
It's a radical stripping away of worldly life.
It really is. Abstaining from acting as a go-between, From buying and selling, cheating with weights or measures, bribery, fraud, violence like mutilation, murder, imprisonment, robbery. It's about cultivating complete harmlessness and integrity.
Okay, so ethics first. Then what?
Contentment and simplicity. The practitioner is content with just the basics. Robes to wear, alms food to eat, like a bird, the text says, carrying only its wings.
That's a lovely image.
And crucially, building on that ethical base, sense restraint. This is key.
How does that work in practice?
When it's seeing a form, hearing a sound, smelling, tasting, touching, or thinking a thought, they don't grasp at the overall sign or the specific details that might provoke desire or aversion.
So not getting lost in judging things as beautiful or ugly and getting carried away.
Exactly. They guard the sense doors.
Why?
To prevent those unwholesome states, greed, distress, covetousness from flooding the mind, this guarding itself leads to a kind of inner, blameless happiness.
And this needs constant attention, I guess.
Constant mindfulness and clear comprehension, being fully aware in every activity, walking, standing, sitting, speaking, eating, dressing, even using the toilet or staying silent. Total present moment awareness.
That sounds demanding.
It is, but it's the training. And through this diligent practice, the practitioner starts to overcome the main obstacles in the mind, the 5 hindrances.
Which are?
Covetousness or sensual desire, ill will or aversion, sloth and torpor, like mental dullness and sleepiness, restlessness and remorse, that agitated, worried mind, and finally doubt, especially skeptical doubt about the path itself.
Okay, so you work on abandoning those.
Yes, purifying the mind. And when the mind is free from these hindrances, it becomes clear, calm, concentrated. This allows for the attainment of the jhanas.
These deep meditative states we hear about.
Exactly. States of profound absorption, tranquility, and equanimity. There are 4 main levels described.
And this is where the real fruit comes, the liberation.
This is where it culminates. In that purified, concentrated state, when sense experiences happen, seeing forms, hearing sounds, the practitioner doesn't get hooked anymore. They don't delight in the pleasant or react against the unpleasant.
They just observe.
They maintain mindfulness, equanimity, this boundless awareness. They understand the liberation of mind, the liberation through wisdom, right as it's happening. And those unwholesome states, they just cease completely.
So they experience feelings, but without the reaction.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Without delighting, without craving. And remember the chain. Non-delight in feeling leads directly to the cessation of craving.
Which stops clinging.
Which stops becoming, which stops birth.
Which starts the whole cycle of suffering. Wow.
That's the path laid out.
What strikes me here is the insistence that this isn't just something to, believe on faith.
Absolutely not. The text emphasizes this understanding must be personally known, personally seen, and personally realized. It's experiential.
Not just intellectual.
Right. The Dhamma, the teaching, is described as visible here and now, timeless, inviting inspection leading inwards, to be understood by the wise each for themselves. It's an invitation to investigate your own experience.
It's practical, verifiable.
Very much so. And then, after laying all this out, the problem, the solution, the path, the Buddha gives that final, crucial piece of advice. The raft analogy.
Kulopamaldamai, the teaching is like a raft.
Yes. He says, look, this teaching, this Dhamma I've taught you, even though it's pure and clear and leads to liberation, it's a tool. It's like a raft you build to cross a dangerous river.
To get to the other shore, liberation, Nibbana.
Exactly. But what do you do when you get to the other shore? Do you say, wow, this is a great raft. I think I'll carry it on my head for the rest of my journey?
No, that would be ridiculous. You'd leave it behind.
You'd leave it behind. Its purpose was crossing over, not being clung to forever. He says if someone were to cling even to this perfect teaching after it's served its purpose, they haven't truly understood.
That's profound. Even the path itself isn't the ultimate destination to hold on to.
It raises such a vital question for anyone on any path, spiritual or otherwise. Are you using the teaching, the tools, the concepts to get somewhere? Or are you just clinging to the tools themselves?
Mistaking the map for the territory.
Precisely. And the Buddha then tells the monks to remember this teaching, this brief teaching on the destruction of craving for liberation. And he circles back to Sāti.
The monk who started it all.
Yeah, calling him bound by the great net of craving. It just powerfully underscores how Sāti's initial mistake, clinging to that fixed view of consciousness, was itself a manifestation of the very craving the teaching aims to destroy.
So quite a journey we've taken. From Sāti's very sticky misconception about consciousness.
Yeah, that unchanging entity idea,
To the Buddha's really clear dynamic definition using the fire analogy, consciousness arising dependently.
Then mapping out that whole intricate chain of dependent arising, seeing exactly how ignorance fuels the entire cycle of suffering.
And then seeing the reverse dependent cessation as the path out, lived through ethics, mindfulness, meditation.
Leading to that direct personal realization of freedom.
And finally, that crucial wisdom. Even the path, the raft, is ultimately something to be used and then let go of, not clung to.
It's about the crossing, the transformation, not becoming attached to the vehicle.
So it leaves us with a really potent thought, doesn't it? If even something as profound and helpful as this teaching is ultimately like a raft meant for crossing over and not for clinging, what else in your life, maybe beliefs, identities, even positive habits, might you be clinging to like that raft on your head instead of just using them as tools to get where you need to go?
Yeah. And how might, really taking on board this idea of dependent arising, that things aren't fixed entities but arise based on conditions, how might that shift the way you see your own moment-to-moment experience or even who you think you are?
Lots to chew on there. A truly deep dive.